Hyderabad history and culture is one of my areas of interest. uh, so when I was asked by Danish actually that about this event that there is this book being released. I'm a big film buff, movie buff. My mom's side is from Hyderabad, and they're a big Bollywood. Kishore Kumar. The whole entire Rajesh Khanna, Amitabh Bachchan, and my dad's side are from Warangal, and they're hardcore fans of Telugu cinema. So, so I had a bit of both, right? Growing up was, there was, I can never recollect a time when there was no song playing in the background in our house on the radio, whether it's a Telugu channel and then or a Hindi channel. So I grew up in a family that loved cinema to the core. So, and then I grew up exactly in this era of the late 80s and early 90s. So you see Chiranjeevi bashing the goons. So this is my thing. As soon as I saw the poster, I was sold. I was like, I am so in. And I was, I was reading the book, and I was telling, Mukesh the other day, ki, I felt like this book was written for me. Right? I was laughing, I was giggling, I was, contemplating. I mean, a lot of childhood memories the book brought back. So thank you for writing the book.
No, thank you. My name is Mukesh Manjunath. I wrote this book, The Age of Heroes. Thank you, Korum, and everyone for Danish and everyone for having me. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the book because I think you're the target demographic. I was a target demographic. And pretty much anyone who shares that with us is the target demographic for this. The cover page? Oh,
The cover page
that's
told.
great news.
We were just talking about somebody looks at this cover page in an airport and they're like a Telugu person who's like, you have to pick it up because it's not a it's a thin book, so it will be a quick
Page
read.
1, 2, 3 also get you through the rest of the book, but
Yes, yes. And it was a page turner. I couldn't stop reading it. So yeah, so why don't we start with your childhood memories and how your grandmother played such a important role in shaping this perspective on how to connect films and people, and how did this conscious evolve that there is something the Telugu film continues to play a major role in shaping Telugu society.
uh, let's start with grandmothers. I feel like for most of us, for a lot of us, grandmothers are the first people who sort of tell us stories. That's where we hear stories from. And right, whether it's folk tales, whether it's stories about our house and gossip, we hear stories from our grandmother. And the good thing was my grandmother loved stories, whether they were actual stories or films or whatever, but she told me terrible stories. She was a really bad storyteller in the sense that she told stories badly and she told me bad stories. Uh, but the excellent thing was she had complete power in the house. So when she wanted to watch a movie, we watched that movie. And she was an old woman. Her husband has passed away. She was alone. I was, unemployed, like 5-year-olds usually are. So she took me along to every movie that she ever went to. And I'm not talking about like classic movies. I'm talking about they could be B grade movies that she secretly wanted to watch. It could be serials on TV that she saw. It could be a dubbing movie that she heard about. Just pretty much anything to pass her time between reading the Ramayana, doing puja, taking her medicines, and going to sleep. She would take me with her. So I think that's how I first got introduced to stories and cinema. And it became this bonding activity, right? That, hey, I'm going along, I get to watch movies with her. And then after that, we discuss that movie for hours, and the way you would discuss with a child, and I would ask her, oh, why did they do that? Why did this hero slap that heroine at some level? Why was that villain a bad guy? Why was this lady doing that? And she would tell me in obviously in as much capacity that she could, and then which would obviously always spill over into some moral lesson. Or there's a very Telugu book called Pedwala Siksha, which she would like read out all the stories from that to me. because inadvertently all our stories have some folk connection or some moralistic lesson, and inadvertently any movie that you take that we saw in that era would come down to that.
Yep.
And I think that's how the, I wouldn't say love for cinema, but at least the introduction to cinema and broadly stories and the love for bad stories, I think came, right? I think it's important to hear good stories to know what good stories are. But I think it's even more important to know hear bad stories from an even worse storyteller, because then you're not fixing them automatically in your head. Because there's a part of you that's going, oh, here's how I would have told the story. Here's how I want to tell it. And I think that's where the grandmother figure, and that's where the importance of folk tales comes in, right? Because the, unlike, say, um, standardized epics, which have their own set pattern, right? Hey, this happened, and it's very hard to meddle with epics. There are two big Hindu epics, and there are, of course, like countless satellite stories, but it's very hard to invent on them, right? We're constantly always telling them or retelling them. But I think the excellent thing about folk stories, especially the kind of ones that your grandmother tells you, is that they can go pretty much anywhere, right? They can tell you pretty much any moral. And the one thing I like about folk stories is that they tell you contrasting morals. They can tell you too many cooks spoil the broth, but they also tell you the more the merrier. And I'm obviously anglicizing my morals, but they apply to even Telugu, they apply to Hindi, they apply to Sanskrit, right? Any language you listen to. And I think that to me was the exciting thing about folk stories, that the morals are so flexible, right? And who better to tell you about flexible morals than grandmothers? And that's why, that's how the
Yeah. I mean, she sounds lovely. I would love to read a book on her actually, her personality. A little bit about her love for NTR.
I will tell you. So at that age, I didn't realize it was love. I just because because I'll give you some context, right? Like her husband had passed away, which is my grandfather. So she was a single widowed woman, and there's a certain role in our society, especially when we're kids. We see a single widow take, right? In terms of they're sort of ostracized. Like you can sort of gauge that by the fact that she confided in her grandson her all these secrets, which I was too young to understand then. But the fact that she was telling me that what her childhood was like, or what movies she saw while growing up, or her relationship with her brothers, right? When was she play acting the movies that she saw? So in the book, I discuss it that she talks about how when she first saw Patala Bhairavi, it blew her mind, that she had never seen anything like it, and that she had seen this curly haired macho guy take on bad guys, be funny, be quirky, and in a way now I understand that it was, she wasn't a 60-year-old woman talking to me, but it was a 16-year-old girl falling in love, right? And it's something I understand now as an adult, but back then I'm like, oh, this old woman is just harping on or just telling me, just depositing stuff into my brain that should be said elsewhere. But I think now I understand what she was doing, right? I think the role that she played in the society that we belong to, that she belonged to, sorry, she didn't really enjoy that. She just wasn't a single widow who was taking medicine, who was watching TV serials, who was watching movies and then going to sleep. She was a girl who loved movies. She was a 16-year-old who fell in love with an actor. She was a 20-year-old who didn't want to really get married, right? She wanted to be a singer. And I think, for better or worse, without my consent, I became a listener, and I'm glad for it now. But I think that's why her love for NTR plays such an important role in the book, because I think she just didn't want to be remembered a certain way. And I think that's true for all of us, right? Yeah. It's not just a grandmother thing. Like, we all want to be remembered for our youth. We all want to be remembered for our mistakes, our loves, our dislikes. And it's that much harder for a 60-year-old woman who's a widow 20 years ago to express herself. And I'm just glad she found a space to express it in me. Yeah. And that's why I make it such an important part of the book.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, even like I was reading the book about the grandmother segment, and I recollect my paternal grandmother would also take me to films. We would walk. The nearest theater was about 15 minutes a walk from our house. So we'd go, and then there there would be a dargah in between, and then she would circumambulate 3 times along with me, and then put all her wishes forth, all her prayers forth, and then we would go to the film. So it was like a tradition almost. So that and then she became good friends with the Dargah Mutawali, right? And then their family and our family are still in touch
That's excellent.
because of this tradition, the movie going, and then this dargah thing. I mean, so it reminded me of my grandmother, and it
That's like,
made me teary
how
eyed.
is that everybody who reads the book? Even the grandmothers we don't like. There's always one grandmother we like and there's one we don't like, and I hope it rekindles your love affair with both.
So this, so one thing you talk about it a little bit in the book. This obsession with beauty standards, right? Ungarala Juttu, NTR, right? And then Mahesh Babu, oh baby face, and he's fair. All of a sudden, the only fair, fairer than fair. I mean, my cousins, they're like, I mean, I personally don't think of him as a good actor, but he has a lot of fans. And when you ask them what is the first appealing thing, they say, he's so fair. I mean, what are, I mean, how are these beauty standards? I mean, look at how there's Ungarala Juttu at NTR, and that was his USP. Everybody, all our grandparents, I mean, that Ungarala Juttu, and nobody, not even any Hollywood star could be as handsome as NTR because of that lock of hair. No, I mean, he was larger than life, right? I mean, all the roles he played. As you said, अपना Mahabharata, Ramayana, all the Puranas. I mean, he is there anything that he didn't play? I can't think of. So do you want to comment upon this beauty standards that Telugu cinema sort of instilled in our minds?
No, I think what I was trying to say with that was that one, as we know, there are certain codified beauty standards that we all hear of now, whether it's fair skin, whether it's straight hair, etc. But I think it's also to bring into light that actually there are alternate beauty standards existing within the society that we already occupy. That we don't have to look towards Black Panther, we don't have to look towards anything from the West or even the North. And this is not coming from a very regionalistic sense. It's coming more from we just need to look a little inwards, and by inwards, not just into some spiritual sense, our soul, but also into our own families, right? There are so many people that, what we, especially those conditioned by sort of Western pop culture, that we're like, oh, this must be the norm. Actually, it's not the norm. If you speak to our parents, if you speak to our grandparents, the kind of people that we find attractive, the kind of styles that we find attractive are incredibly unattractive. Right? Like there are ways, there are ways in which and I know this used to be a fight when I was a kid, which is that there are ways in which my grandmother wanted to dress me up, which my parents would balk at, right? And fair enough, it is opposing beauty standards. And similarly, there's a way in which your parents want to see you that you don't want to see. You don't want to see yourself as. And so I think, and I'm not trying to pass some large comment on beauty standards per se, but I think to me what was interesting was that something that, and also just, we also hear about South Indian actors being trolled, especially male actors being not good looking enough. But I think it's also for us to re-hear again that, hey, within our families, within our, and I hate using this word here, but within our culture, that beauty standards are already different. We don't have to seek validation from elsewhere, even for our alternative, right? It's sad that not only is our norm coming from elsewhere, but even the alternative that we look for is coming from elsewhere. And I'm saying, hey, let's not try that hard. Just talk to your grandmother and she'll tell you you're ugly or beautiful, whichever you want to hear. As my grandmother constantly used to tell me that, hey, the way your mother dresses you up is horrendously ugly. Don't listen to her. And just that should be enough. So it's not a large comment about society, but I thought we don't need to look elsewhere, even for our alternative.
And by the way, his grandmother's love for NTR and her love for him, there is a special connection that I don't want to spoil by revealing it in this interview, but that's for you to find out when you read the book. So moving on.
Doing a great job promoting the book. You've got the book.
No, I love that bit so much. So I know that it's not to be revealed. Um, so the Telugu cinema hero. I mean, you talk about how some of the things that happen on the screen, like the physics defying stunts, cars. There are cars flying in the air, and there are 15 people being beaten by our hero single handedly, and then there are dialogues, and then and you say that, and it's true that we are watching it, we know that it's not real, we know that it can't work that way in the real world that we live in, but yet we see the same template being repeated over and over and over, even till today. I mean, the hero has to there is a hero introduction scene. There has to be this, just the technology has changed, but the semantics are the same. So how do you sort of, how did you process it, and what is your commentary on
So, my understanding of this phenomenon, right? That okay, why is there such physics-defying stuff? Why? And there's a big critique against Telugu cinema. Part of the reason why it's looked down upon in the academic space or in a pop culture space, right? Is that hey, it's physics-defying, it's not real enough. And I think in the book I argue that in the West, cinema came after the step of literature. That there was literature, people wrote books, and then it was followed by cinema. But I argue in the book, and my belief also is that for us, especially in Telugu cinema, our jump wasn't from literature to cinema, our jump was from folk stories to cinema. And in folk stories, inadvertently, the hero is larger than life. Right? Even when we retell the epics, the Hindu epics, we do add our exaggeration. Like I know there was one line that my grandmother used to say when she used to tell me the Mahabharata stories was that, oh, Bhimudu banded annam tinnevadu, which means Bhima used to eat a cart full of rice. Now, you'd be really stupid to think that, oh, he's actually eating a cart full of rice, but that's the flavor of the story. So if you see our cinema as an extension of a folk story, then it makes complete sense why within this culture, such stories are being told. And that why we as people who sort of quote unquote skip the literature beat in the evolution of storytelling, we love such stories. And anywhere else, whether if you look at Malayalam cinema, they have a strong readership base because they have a readership culture, which explains why their cinema is a certain way. Even Tamil cinema also has a certain amount of readership, wide readership, which is why their films are realistic when they get rustic, sort of a sense. Right? They're only realistic when they're rustic, which means because their literature about their villages is very strong and their leadership is very strong there. Whereas for us, we're completely happy, and it's also elitist to be like, hey, it's to be realistic because we're taking from folk stories and we love our folk stories so much that our heroes are also an extension of the folk stories we tell, which is why I argue that Patala Bhairavi is the first folk story ever, and that's why it's such a big hit because till then, until that moment in Telugu cinema history, we were trying to tell stories that were from literature. But for the first time, you told a folk story with all its dashingness and crassness and humor and like appeal, and also the inherent slight selfishness of a folk story character. He's not sermonizing, he's not moralizing. He's like, hey, I want to get the princess, I want to be wealthy, but if I save people along the way, good for them. And look at even now when Pushpa is a big hit, that's the core emotion, right? That I'm going to become big, I'm going to save the princess. Bahubali is the same thing. He goes looking for a princess, he saves a kingdom. But ultimately, it's the pursuit of self-interest, which I think is the extension of why our stories are a certain way. And that's what you need to understand before you judge the cinema or you judge the people who love the cinema, more importantly.
Yeah, my next question was going to be like how you argue Patala Bhairavi is such a foundation for how a template of sort, right? That movies keep recycling up until Bahubali and even beyond. And I think I was going to ask you to explain the template, but you just answered my question in your. So the Pathala, in the historic Telugu cinema, one thing that really appealed to me was the antagonists, right? Like S.V. Rangarao and Surya Kantam, and you dedicate a good amount of, words towards them, which, that whole song, right? Vivahavu janambu, vintaina vantakambu, Yalavari vindu, aha nake mundu. I mean, I've heard this maybe 20, 25 years ago, but could never get it out of my. So I thought that was amazing, and I mean the amount of screen time, and then Surya Kantam was a badass, right? Surya Kantam, whichever movie she was, she would dominate, and we always see her in a either a mother or a mother-in-law, mostly a wicked mother-in-law, but still taking so much of screen time, and that is one. Did you did you compare cinema of that era with like other, in Bollywood itself or other regional cinema where that was done, or is Telugu cinema unique in that where the villains were given equal, if not more, footage
No,
than
I
the
don't think that's
heroes?
unique to Telugu cinema. I think in general in storytelling, villains are, whether you take Shylock and Shakespeare or whether you take someone in Patalabari or whether you take Bahubali, it's always the villains are going to be strong, and that I think is a general storytelling principle. I don't think that
But then
is unique.
but then now it's almost unhighlighted. Villains are caricatures now, right? I mean, this used to be.
I think in the memorable stories, in the stories that are really stay with us in the long term, I think everywhere a villain or the antagonist is strong, or if not stronger than the protagonist. But of course, there is some commercial cinema which probably
Yeah.
still supports, or which doesn't have such. I mean, but I don't think that's cinema that's going to be studied for long or going to stay in public discourse for long.
Right. I mean, in the last 20 years or so, we see villains imported from Bombay. They can't speak Telugu. It's just all these funny imported villains that we have. And then you mentioned it's easy to sort of, it's easy to establish a conflict, right? I mean, just throw in intena, ni Telugu dammu intena. Is this, then you call on the, the Telugu fervor, and then you have an explosive scene. So I don't know. That's why I thought like the quality of developing the antagonist drastically went down in Telugu cinema, and we may be at like an all-time low. I mean, even at least Ram Gopal Verma used to have excellent antagonist. Uh, what about now? Let's talk about the Chiranjeevi Shobhan Babu era. Yeah. So Chiranjeevi,
I don't talk about that in the book, but just I don't know. I don't want to speculate on past comments in general.
yeah.
So if there's something related to the book, I'll definitely answer.
Yeah. I mean, you do. It's like Chiranjeevi was, for example, other cinemas had like stars as well as actors as well as, and in that like late 80s, early 90s, Chiranjeevi is all we had, like Gharana Mogudu, and he's all kinds of Mogudu, like Allari Alludu Mogudu, this and that, and it was larger than life. And one thing, he started with, I feel like Shah Rukh Khan sort of copied his career graph, where Chiranjeevi started as a villain. He was in negative roles, and he was very impressive in those roles, very sinister. As a child, I would be afraid of that character, and then he became slowly, a positive character, and then from there he had a few super hits, and then he became untouchable. Like, I mean, nobody could ever reach his stardom after that. So during that time, there is a specific template of mother-in-law and son-in-law, atta alludu, the conflict that is like it's fascinating that you caught it. I mean, we know that there are hundreds of movies, but I've never heard anybody writing about it publicly, like in a book or in a talk or in a show. So I want you to comment on that template. And
My argument is very simple, which is that there are certain genres that only work for us, right? And that certain genres don't translate elsewhere. And those genres that work for us, right? And also talk about the fact that we have Yama as a films that regarding Yama as one very specific sub-genre that it's very specific to us. It takes the man versus death conflict to another level, right? And my argument is that all of these sub-genres that we have actually come to us from folktales. And ultimately, it's the, which we were talking about, the Ataludu relationship being a slightly quasi-sexual relationship, also comes from our folktales, our villages, our roots. So my argument is that I think when we look for stories, I think it was not, it was to dig deeper within, get more stories as opposed to looking westward, northward, and that's what I was trying to say. That we have these two amazing genres that are unique only to us, which is the Yama genre and which is the subgenres rather actually. My argument is that when we look towards our folk stories, we get to a very unique subgenres. Whether you like them or not, that's separate. But hey, they gave us two pieces that's very unique. They're not found in any other film industry, and that's what I was trying to say. That hey, we need to look more inward, and that will help us tell better stories and give us more unique stories.
And the number of red lines that narrative crosses. My God, we have songs, right? Where Chiranjeevi is dancing with both the daughters and the atta in the same song. And he's like, dancing around all the three women. And, it's just amazing how the template works out in Telugu cinema. Uh, there is an important chapter, miscast heroes or something, you call badly cast heroes. And how you, this whole, when you look at the history, and I mean, we have Telugu cinema is a complicated topic because now the way you connect it to culture and the socio-cultural aspect, and then we have the political aspect to it, Telangana versus Andhra versus, and then we have class and caste angle to it. And I absolutely loved that you bring in all these difficult topics, and and there is a, like, for example, I think this ran out of format. No, I just wanted to ask you, like, this dimension, I've never seen it before being addressed so openly, so publicly. So how was this? How did this develop, and how was the
So in that chapter, I actually explore this topic through a friend. I think it talks about how when I was growing up in Anantapur, I had a friend, and there was a theater that played only soft porn films. And we were curious. We didn't know what was happening in there. We just wanted to go there. And then on the one day that we went to go, we somehow sneaked in and we planned everything. There was an R. Narayan Murthy film playing. And we were so disappointed. We went to see a blue film and we saw a red film at the end. I explore caste through that. I mean, that's the entry point, and then I explore it through the idea of how my friend grows up and how we both had different trajectories in life, and how caste plays a role in his life, and how blind I am to it, and how conscious he is about it, and what it does to him towards the end, right? And that's how I explore it, because ultimately it is a big topic. I have no answers, I have no solutions. I don't think I have any new observations either. But all I wanted to say was that we sometimes forget with these very broad topics, especially when we critique cinema, that how personal it is, how much it affects something that can be innocent at first, and how it can grow out into something that's slightly toxic, and how much it can affect a mind that is innocent at first, and how in the end it becomes toxic. And to me, my argument is that on the end of the day, to me, as a person who is privileged and ticks all the privilege boxes, to me, the biggest loss is that of a friend. And because I'm speaking from the perspective of a 7-year-old boy who loses his friend to something. And you need to read the book, I think, to get what I'm talking about here. But so the way I explore it is that, okay, there are all these big questions and statements that we can make about caste, and I don't have any solutions or answers or even no observations. But ultimately, what's at loss is a very personal equationship. Sorry, not equationship. That's a nice term. But ultimately, that you lose a friend, or you lose the innocence a friend possesses. And to me, and I think when we explore it like that, it becomes a more digestible topic. It becomes a more discussable topic. It becomes I think we become kinder towards the topic in discussing it, because we understand the personal cost that it has, as opposed to the broad narrative and the identity politics it brings to us.
Yeah, and it's funny, but it's also very true that, like, the our Telugu society is very much a caste segregated society, and everybody has found a hero for themselves, right? The Rajus have Prabhas, the Kammas have had NTR, and the Kapus have Paval Kalyan. Everybody's happy. I mean, every dominant caste is happy because there is representation, right? And when you bring in Era Cinema. You keep spoiling my questions. So that was my next one. The blue, going to blue film and watching a red film was my next question. But anyway, that was very funny. And so you ask a question, right? Who killed the red? What killed the red cinema? What killed this genre? And that's your end. I think it was brilliant analysis. So and then so now we have to talk. It also talks about some of the not just Narayanamurthy but some of the mainstream directors also made films about protagonists from a lower caste backgrounds, what their lives are, in the villages and even in urban, and then you there is a profound comparison between how these stories are told. Like, for example, when Chiranjeevi is playing it, right, it becomes a class issue. Like a poor Chiranjeevi is well educated, but he's poor, but he's unable to, get ahead of his game. But then when Narayan Murthy tells a story, there is a specific caste location, right? That there is this woman, tribal woman, was raped, and was there's so much injustice. So was that, how was it? Was it a difficult, how it is a difficult topic. So how did you sort of process the class versus caste?
Uh, so my approach to writing this was, like I said, I keep the 7-year-old and 8-year-old boy as a protagonist. The way I do it is, it's like you said it, right? Who killed this cinema? So then I approach it like a murder mystery and like two friends going about solving a mystery. So to me, what was interesting was how quiet it is about this topic we are as a society, especially when we are children, even though the signs are all in front of us, whether it's parents or the lack of the discussion about the topic, the lack of the discomfort that it brings or the silence it brings in a house, and what it means to a child. So I think what saved me in addressing the topic was to keep that childlike gaze at it, because no one's going to yell at a child. Right? If a child says a stupid thing, no one's going to yell at a child. So that was my approach, basically, which is that, hey, here's the observations made by an 8-year-old me or an 8-year-old friend of mine, and here's what they had to say. Similarly, I talk about how when I first found out, when I was in school, there was some incident where I was leading a revolt in school against a teacher who was taking partiality on girls. And I was trying to find heroes to look. And ultimately, you don't. And then I came across this Telugu leader called Tarimal Nagireddy. And how that shaped me, just to finding out that, hey, there was someone like who led a revolt. It was living so close by. And it's that childlike discovery of heroes and actors within society.
Yeah. And then it was also, I found it amusing, your crush on your Fatima Miss. I mean, who hasn't had a crush on their Miss, right? I mean, it wasn't really a crush, but I really loved my Kishori Miss. Her name was Kishori Miss. And so and then we see this played out in even, it in itself is a Telugu film. So your life was a Telugu film, right from the childhood.
No, that is a dangerous statement to make. Because then I may wonder who the villain is. But I think the idea was that it's to see how much films influence, right? The direct impact films have, whether it's on a 7-year-old boy, whether it's on a 25-year-old teacher, right? What is the impact of seeing a film, and how does it change the lives? Like, it changed her life. She saw a film and then she had to move to a different town, and I got thrashed by my parents for trying to imitate the cars over hand stunt on a road, etc. Right? So I think it was mostly just that.
Yeah, and you talk about there's this. I think it comes up in a conversation, like if a Telugu person and a non-Telugu person are both watching a Telugu film, and one has signed a contract and the other one has not. So. What is that contract, if you can,
It's the contract is what I say in the book, which is that, hey, I am not stupid to believe that this is true, but I'm having fun. It's almost like I'm taking a drug and it's your choice whether to take the drug or not. this drug, the effect is gonna be with me for 2.5, 3 hours, and after this goes, I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to intellectualize it, that's up to you, because I know what I'm signing up for, and you don't. So the losses is
Yeah.
on you. So there's nothing for me to be either embarrassed about or justify.
Yeah.
And that's it. That was the idea.
And the two people who are having a conversation in the book. So somebody's like, "This is, I mean, all these cars flying in the air. This is so stupid." I'm like, yeah, "Duh! Don't you know? I mean, don't you know that I know that it's stupid?" it's like how stupid of you to assume that I don't know that it's stupid, but yet I'm in this contract. I'm going to enjoy it, right? I'm going to be on this high on this drug. I think that was superbly brought up.
Thank you.
Uh, and then, I mean, we made enough fun of Telugu films, but you also there you also bring in where a genre which is not it was very less explored, but nevertheless it was where Telugu literature also played role. The trinity of Telugu poets that you bring in. So if you could, where did you if you could shed some light on
Right.
that
So,
subgenre?
No, so I think in the third chapter, my argument is that, hey, Telugu people never really read books, and the books never really connected to en masse. And sort of that declining readership, there was a void left for cultural actors, heroes, characters to take place, and that's where heroes come. And the way I explore this is with my Telugu teacher when I was growing up, who also loved NTR so much and who saw a film when he was a young person where NTR played a teacher and he influences and changes society. And he decided to become a teacher because he saw that film. And it's about how this man, my Telugu teacher, lives his life, changed the direction of his life because he saw one film. And how he always wanted to be this Telugu purist and have this ideal Telugu students. But in society, especially in the society while I was growing up and while most of us were growing up, Telugu wasn't really encouraged. We were never given Telugu books. We were always asked to take Hindi. I don't know if that was a thing because we were like, hey, anyway, Telugu is spoken at home, so just take Hindi as an extra language. And the disappointment of the Telugu teacher who took such a big decision of his life based on a film now faces because he sees the world changing around him and he's not able to control it. But I also sort of blame it on him in the sense that I feel literature becomes very academic and very exclusive. And minute literature or any discussion becomes exclusive and academic, it loses its connect with the people, and there's something much more dangerous waiting on the periphery to take over. So in the book, I talk about how when we had a Telugu teacher who took us to this Telugu fair, which is like this where we go and give presentations in Telugu, and it could be anything, right? And so obviously my Telugu teacher made me come up with a presentation on 3 great writers of Telugu literature. And at that festival, he got into a big fight with another Telugu teacher who said, look, these are the 3 most pivotal characters in Telugu literature, and the ones that he's come up with are the 3 most. And I'm like, both of them are fighting, right? And the students who are me and the other person were very lost and confused, and which is very hungry because we're just watching our 2 teachers fight and they're not giving us food. And the person who ended up winning the competition was the guy who dressed up as a farmer. And to me, that summed up everything wrong with Telugu literature perfectly, because here are these 2 purists fighting in one corner, and the guy who dressed up as a farmer won. And that's pretty much the story of Telugu films and Telugu literature, right? The purists kept fighting amongst each other, and then the actor came and stole the audience away. So the reader went away, and the reader emerged as an audience member to something more passive that's less alienating.
And then somewhere in the book, the whole emergence of NTR as a Telugu hero, and also bridging the gap between the Telangana Andhra conflict, where the Teluguness, I mean, he sort of plays, all those, I mean, who forgets them, like 2 rupees a kg BM. NTR, was, and at the same time, I mean, we know that he was, very much Kama, and his the people who sort of the businessmen and the clout that used to hang around him was, people of the same caste. Now, so from there, you derive the argument till from that date till today, it is mostly these 5 or 6 families that sort of control the production, distribution. I mean, at least before OTT, we would say. I mean, OTT has now sort of come as a blessing for anybody who has a talent. I mean, it's still difficult. It's not as easy as you walking inside a door and telling your story. But at least before the advent of OTT, it's still these five families controlling every aspect of Telugu cinema from production to release. And that was a very sad. Me as an aspiring filmmaker, like 10, 15 years ago, like I would have just forget it. I mean, where would you get a chance? But now that OTT, there's a lot of people like me who are like, making films, making, web series, making, and then there's a lot of, like, I've never seen so much Telugu content out there as we now have. And it's amazing. And, and so is the variety of subjects, as you said before, like from Patala Bhairavi to Bahubali, it was following this a certain template of the folk templates. Now, all of a sudden, we have this we like horror genre, or there was a comedy genre, but then a lot of exploring human relationships, exploring childhood, romances, and there's just so much Telugu content out there for now, as of now, that it's just unbelievable. So how, like, this when you were a child, at what point did you notice that the Telugu industry is like so much in control of these few powers, and how did you navigate that in the book?
Uh, no. So I think in the book it was. I mean, because like I said, I mean, I think because you're an insider, it's something that affects you in a way. Whereas for me, it's just an observation I'm making.
Right.
So it wasn't hard for me to. It's not an observation I've made freshly. It's an observation that's not. Generally, we always have. I mean, I think sadly, industries tend to become oligopolistic, right? That's the natural tendency, and then something has to break it. So that's it. I think to me, it wasn't a hard thing to write because it's an observation that's already exists, and it was easy to make. I don't think there was anything fresh for me to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, exists but not talked about, or not talked about enough.
I think it's talked about. It's maybe not codified in a book.
Huh.
So maybe that's probably the new thing.
Yeah.
But I think everybody sort of knows it in informal discussions and everywhere people always say it. And it's sort of an accepted fact almost now. And I was like, okay, how do you play this game?
Oh. And then, of course, we now have to talk about Vijayashanti, who's the hero of the heroes, and how there were very few women who sort of, I mean, there were women characters. I mean, for example, K. Vishwanath that you bring in, was absolute amazing women characters. But then at the, there in K. Vishwanath's films, as you rightly pointed, there's always two layers, right? One layer which is playing in front of your eyes, and the other layer in the background where the protagonist is lost to the ways of the world, and the Kodalu, who's she has to, Kodalu or Bidda, or this larger than life woman character has to bring him back, and then at the end it's one whole patriarchal happy family with songs and dance and a culture and everything. So the Vishwanath made, like, I mean, his storytelling was just so excellent that you could just it's I mean, I didn't realize the second layer until like very recently, like maybe 5-10 years ago, and so you use the word that how sort of Telugu cinema set out to re-engineer Telugu society in a little bit, and I see glimpses of it. I can't tell that that's the only factor that sort of influences Telugu society. But when did you feel? When did you feel? How did that word re-engineer come about?
I think re-engineer came about once you hear stories about how the big personal decisions that people make based on what they saw, whether it's to a political act like voting, whether it's a personal act like choosing your career, or whether it's an emotional act like telling your grandson a story, right? You first think it's only your family, and then you step out and you meet more people, and then everyone has a story like that about a decision that was taken, a big a personal decision that was taken because of something that stemmed from a film. And I think that's how I came about the idea that it, and the absence of really any heroes from other spheres of life, right? We broadly have mostly heroes from a film culture. And I think it was that. So it could be seen as a critique that, hey, why isn't society producing more of this? But it could be seen as, hey, this is who we like and this is who we want. And this is who we'll model ourselves after.
Yeah, and then I mean, Telugu cinema as a whole, like, it's not about like in as like my grandmother going back to her grandmother. It's not about going and watching a good cinema or a bad. It's just about going to watch a Telugu cinema. Like there is an incident that you bring up where you had attended a funeral of a relative, and then all of a sudden somebody breaks the silence. So what are we doing tonight? Should we go watch a Pawan Kalyan film? I mean, to fill the gap in our hearts as well as fill the time. So the idea of turning all these thoughts into a book, when did that occur, and how was that journey? How long did it take, and how was the journey till this point?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are two parts. There's like a romantic answer and there's a very unromantic answer. So I'll tell the romantic answer first. I've always wanted to do this. No, I think there was an opportunity to write a book on cinema, which was shown by HarperCollins, etc. And I think there were many versions like I was playing around with, which is okay, how do I talk about? Because when you talk about cinema, you can talk about many things. Like you said, you can critique it, you can write an academic book. But I think what struck to me was ultimately it's a very personal experience, Telugu cinema, in the sense that it's all familiar to us. But I think what to me stuck out from my life when I reflected upon it, and I think maybe for others also it will stick out, is that somehow Telugu cinema, I don't want to call it a dirty secret, but it's sort of like something people are almost embarrassed to admit it in a very public setting. Like we all love talking about it. We love spending hours about it. And I think one of the first things that you ask anytime you meet another Telugu person is like, hey, which is like, which films have you seen? Right? But somehow we hate admitting it to other people. There's something about it which is, I don't want to use the word shame, but it comes from hey, let's keep it a secret. But I'm like, I'm going to reveal the secret. And also because I wanted to talk about all the other personal experiences, which wouldn't find, because I always want to write books. I always want to write more books, and hopefully I will write more books about different and varying topics. But some of these peculiar experiences that I've written about in the book, I didn't find a channel for them elsewhere. Like I couldn't squeeze them into another book I was trying to write. I couldn't find, because I also want to write fiction. I didn't find a space for them there. And I think I was like, you know what? Let's give them the home that they deserve. And I do feel like the home that they deserved was a book about cinema and a book about these people. And I think to me, the actors and the heroes are all backstage. To me, it's the people and their decisions and their emotions and the stories that they tell are actually the main meat of what the book is. Everyone else, the actors, their politics, and the big actions, the reshaping of culture is in the background for me. And to me, so I'm like, okay, how can I tell a story about these people as protagonists? And that's how this book came about. And the very unromantic answer is that HarperCollins paid me for this. So I said, and I said, you know what? It's very hard to be a writer. So let's do one for them. And then maybe now I can convince them, that they'll get me to give me a second book, which will come out hopefully next year. All of you watch out. It's going to be equally magnificent.
No, that was excellent. We had a brief conversation before, like a couple of days ago, and then we're like, all these thoughts. I mean, I've had similar thoughts, but I'm glad you wrote the book, not me, because mine would be like all of this, 80 pages critique, and then I would be receiving death threats, like a negative review of Arjun Reddy I write, and then next day my Facebook has 87, like 600 shares, and by the time I got up, there were like 87 people abusing me on Facebook. So. No, with that, let's open it up to the audience. I don't know how many of you have read the book, or you don't necessarily have to have read the book. I mean, we all know Telugu cinema, right?
Just asking any personal question.
Any personal question. Did you ever expect there'll be books on Telugu cinema written? Anything at all that comes to your mind that you want to ask, Mukesh?
See, one of my favorite aspects of this book is how you break that thing, that as kid, when we were growing up, when we were watching Telugu cinema, we are always told that don't tell that you like these films, or even parents don't encourage us to watch Telugu films. And as a kid, to be very honest, like the kind of films that I grew up with, they are like kind of like horror shit that I wouldn't want kids of these generation to watch. To be very honest, the violence and all that. At what point did you? I mean, like the fact that you said that in the book, I found it very cool that you addressed it. That Telugu cinema is something that you need to be embarrassed about. That's the notion that they put in our heads, right? So, at what point did you decide that there's nothing, nothing to be embarrassed about, but rather I flaunt this love? What point did that realization or epiphany happen?
Uh, so I think I had an ambivalent. Okay, so I think anybody who grows up watching cinema or any sort of cinema buff, I think there's a general trajectory we have, especially when we grow up watching, say, one regional cinema, which is you watch the regional cinema, then you explore other cinema, which is like international cinema or whatever, right? And then you sort of get embarrassed by the cinema you grew up with, and then as you grow up, you sort of find a middle ground, and you're sort of, you know, yeah, it's like you go travel the world, right? It's like you start at home. It's like the alchemist. It's like you start at home, then you travel the world. You go to Poland, you go to Iran, you go to America, you go to South Korea, you go to Malayalam, and then you finally come back home. And to me, that was basically the broadly the emotional journey. But I think the exact moment, I think when I realized, hey, this is not something for me, was um, I think actually I have a friend who's very proud. So in college was the first time I felt like, hey, why is everyone mocking me for liking the cinema, wanting to go for it? That was the first time it struck me out as something that it can be. Not that you're mocking it within it, but someone else from outside is mocking it. Someone who doesn't understand context to it. And I think the idea, that's the first bulb of, okay, people are mocking me for it, or mocking my friends for it. Then the idea to write the book, I think, came. I stay in Bombay now. I work there, and that's where my base is. And I think when I moved to Bombay, and I saw how people were comfortable talking about either the quirks of it or the real, the real shameful corners and the not so shameful corners of their society, of their films. Sorry, I'm like, hey, people are so comfortable talking about this, but how come I can never do this with my family or my friends? And I was like, I think somewhere from there, and you read people like Salman Rushdie, right, who's an Indian author. The sort of Indianness he talks about, I didn't see people like my grandmother there. I read R.K. Narayan, when we all read R.K. Narayan growing up at some level, you don't see people like your parents there. You see small towns in Tamil Nadu, right? Salman Rushdie gives you this broad-based picture of India and this fantastical story about midnight children and someone in Florence, or Shalimar, which is set in Kashmir, which has this deep-rooted conflict, right? You read other Indian writers, right, who they'll talk about some history of Delhi and the Mughals and the Sultans, but you don't need to have such intense role in history to be talked about, all right? To talk about what you love. And I think somewhere within these thoughts of, here's I'm being made fun of, hey, other people are very comfortable about talking about what shaped them, and the idea that, hey, Indianness is being defined as in so many terms, but what about the Indianness that I come from, right? I think somehow within this, you triangulate it, and Age of Heroes comes. Yeah.
Nice. Can I? Yeah, sure. First of all, I didn't know until now it was a book. I just saw the movie, the discussion from Bangalore, but I didn't know they made a lot. So there's no mention about Shogun Bob?
I think it's just a brief one. I think, like I said, I think don't go. I think I would say the approach to this book is, don't go looking for the heroes. Just go look for the emotions you grew up with while growing up, and hopefully you relate with it. And that's the most I'm promising, because your favorite actor, your family's favorite actor might not be there, or maybe you might not agree with the things I say. But I'm 100% sure that every emotion that I mention, you'll resonate with it with some person in your life. Maybe it might not be a Telugu teacher, maybe it might not be a grandmother for you, but it'll be someone else.
I grew up in a joint family. We were like 50 people living in one house, so I had a lot of grants.
Sure, no, then you'll probably get it.
Going to movie is like an ultimate treat for anyone, be it of any age. What else we have to do? Music on the radio or some Doordarshan TV channel or music coming out. So I relate totally to that. And especially when you said the influence it has it was even voice for a lot of women, like my mom's age or even before, who couldn't speak in their families.
Yeah.
So when they go to a movie and they go, the mother-in-law is dominant and the daughter-in-law goes, answers her back. They find a relief in them. I've seen this in the theater happening. They're not silent about everything and all, and they go, they feel a sense of relief when they come out, and then they discuss with the fellow ladies in the house and all. I saw that when I was growing up, and when I was a teenager. Say we don't really know the concept of love and all. So most all the influence we had was from the movies. So when I was there, I'm like late 80s and 90s kid. So the right time was Prema Desam, Premikudu, what is Kushi and all. So it was like a direct influence. And I was kind of forced into having a girlfriend then. I was in my 10th standard and all my friends had like things, so I was alone. I'm like, oh,
What an excellent problem to have.
seriously, the effect what we have is like crazy. And last now our talk about is as we should embrace our culture, our movies. Balaya is what? He's a Marvel superhero, he's bigger than that. So the Thor or anyone, Hulk smashes a train, you're like, wow, amazing. Balaya stops a train, it's a problem. Why? I don't know. I don't know. No cash, nothing. Just as a movie buff I'm talking about, I think, as you said, when you go to movie, should just leave all the logic and all, just embrace it. Have fun and come. Nothing else. And now, sorry, one last thing. The comedy part. How I feel the comedy part is like really vital in Telugu movie industry. Is there anything specifically for that?
Book is damn funny. So that's the general tone of the book. You can't talk about a book about Telugu film without being funny. So I have it. It's very subtle, but it's there.
Sure.
So when you mentioned about the contract that you have, I've not read the book yet. So there are a couple of movies that I watched in a different language, and then it was remade into Telugu, and then I watched the Telugu one also. So then when I mentioned that I enjoyed the Telugu version better, a lot of people asked me, which one did you watch first? So I actually genuinely watched for example, the Prema, I watched the Malayalam one first. But I very honestly loved the Telugu version much better. So I don't know if it's a bias or, it's so for me, movies are, I'm sure for any Telugu person, movie is an escape. So it need not be logical, it need not be, at the end of the day, we need to feel good once we're out. So when I watch a few of the other language films, I feel some of the movies have a sad ending, and I feel I'm not having a good feeling after watching the movie. So a Telugu movie, you always end up happy once you're done with the movie. The hero wins, the good people win, and it's always so that's one thing that even if it's a bias, I don't care. I don't mind.
Yes.
Just always pro Telugu films.
Great. Yeah, my aim is not to get hyper what is the word, chauvinistic about this. I think it should just be like this. Like it should be like, hey, you can just embrace it without trying to be like this is the best and be all and end all. We can just be like, hey, you can enjoy everything. I think my argument is you can enjoy this, you can enjoy art film from Iran, you can enjoy this, you can enjoy, just taps into different sides of you.
So we'll take one last question. Yep.
Yeah, I think I come from a family who's fond of very much Telugu movies. I brought my mother and wife also actually to half the audience is from my family. But the point I want to say is, I think not like the way some of the audience are saying, I think the feel good factor, you go to a state of delirium. A state where you are you're very happy. When you look around, there's so many problems in lives and society and so on. You want to find a way, and typically the hero, I see the self-righteousness, or in terms of working class hero, who always does the right things. Many times I found, in the childhood upbringing, I have to be like this. Somewhat inspirational, somewhat what is the right thing to do, how do you respect others and be a good person and so on. I think that influence is quite a bit in those movies. While the embarrassing part, later you realize, but then there is a part where I think, there's some kind of, what the moralistic kind of a thing is the one what these heroes also taught. That is one element. The other thing the other observation that I have is I work for a large organization with 1 lakh people. So I see a mini society. So one problem what I see though, I just want to reflect, sometimes we are very strict about, the kind of behavior that we expect in the organization. Most of the, particularly Telugu or South Indian, for example, they think that pursuing a girlfriend in the office, as in movies, is the right way of doing. And we have to tell them, no, this is not the right way. You have to behave yourself because they watch movies and they think that, in fact, I have to warn some people and then they come back and say, hey, then how do I get married? So they'll say, not the movie way, you have other ways. We have zero tolerance. And yeah, those things are all, as seen as harassment, boyfriend and harassment, which is, because the hero pursues the girl, right, vigorously. And without anything,
No, I'm glad you bring it up. These things need to be discussed, right? And then one contradiction that we also see in Telugu films is the hero will beat up somebody who does that.
Yeah.
But then the hero himself will go.
I think that's in a way it's a reflective of society. At one point of time, as society is changing, the movie genre or the themes or the way they behave.
It's a reflection of our own hypocrisy, right? Like the way we pursue a girl, especially I'm just talking about the men here, the way we pursue a girl, we'll always be like, I'm amazingly correct. But if someone else were to do it, we'd be like, that's harassment. You know what I'm trying to say? So I don't think it's the flaws in the cinema, it's in us only, right? If we talk about everyone's love stories from here, the way they narrate it, right? If I were to do it, he were to do it from his forced girlfriend, if Moses were to do it, or if you were supposed to do it, sir, you tell it as if you were the hero. Everything you did was correct, and either the girl was wrong or wronged or whatever. But if you talk about someone else's, you'll be like, oh, that's straight up harassment. So I think it's the way you and I function that's wrong. I'm saying you and I, as in not you and I, but those general men in general, the way we pursue it and we tell our own stories. I'm including myself in this list. I'm not saying I'm above this. I think maybe that's the takeaway. That of course we can change that, but maybe the way we tell the way we reflect on our own past and our own love stories and of our own friends also, maybe that's probably how I would look at it, so that it makes sense to us, as opposed to being like, hey man, why is this like this?
One last question.
Yeah, so a lot of questions were asked here, and like every name that was mentioned as a woman, I noticed are male names. So you also mentioned Vijayashanti in the book, right? Do you also explore like the aspect of how women heroes have evolved, or like maybe some gender aspect with respect to the film?
No, of course I do.
It's like, for me, experiencing Telugu movies is a very different thing. I don't look at a Telugu film and I feel like, hey, you know what, I'm like Chiranjeevi, not really. So, but I'm also not like the heroines there, because I really don't agree with how most women are portrayed. I think by now everyone should agree with that. But like, there is a lot of, progress with respect to that. We have Samantha who has her own families now, which like really didn't exist back then, at least while I was growing up. So that's like really cool to see for me as a woman in Telugu industry. Like, have you also maybe looked at that aspect?
So I don't know if I've explored it the way which is the perfect and all encapsulating way, but I do. The way I approach this is the fact that I talk about how I don't want to spoil it for you. It's there in the book, but the way how I encountered it in a place I didn't like, and the way it showed up with my relationship with my mother a little bit. And it's like what he was talking about, how there's an element of catharsis when you watch a certain thing. And in the end, about how I make peace with it. And when I say I, it's the child in the film, in the book. So I think there is an element I explored it. Now, I don't know if it has all the answers one expects, but I do explore it in my relationship with my mother a little bit. And this uncomfortable place that I find Vijayashanti's films in. I do talk about it. Now, whether you think it's satisfactory, that's up to you. That's up to you to tell me.
So so I it looks like the re-engineering worked.
Yeah, that's the second book you can write. No, Age of Heroes 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it.
So we're also running out of time. Again, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Moses.
Personally,
Thank you for this
as well as on behalf of our audience and the whole Telugu population. Fraternity.
Big thank you.